Welcome to Career Tools. This week, empty disk and presentation downfalls, the high C. The questions this cast answers are, what are high Cs likely to forget when presenting? And how do high Cs increase effectiveness when presenting?
Hey folks, if you're wondering what a high C is, since this cast is about presentations in the high C, then you need to take an empty disk. It's only $30. Come to the website, sign up, pay, take it. Feel free to send me your results. I'll be happy to chat with you about them. It's the best behavioral instrument I've ever seen in my career. That's why we created empty disk, is to address making the instrument as effective as possible. And we lowered the price enormously so that more people could take advantage. The old vendor's price, we had to charge you $80, and we didn't have any choice about that. We are contractually obliged to charge you $80, and it just bugged us that people couldn't afford it. So we make less money now on empty disk than we did on our previous disk, and we don't care. We don't care about how much money we make. We care about whether or not you get a benefit from it. We want always to deliver more value than we charge for. So come to the website, sign up, take the empty disk. You'll learn a great deal more about whether or not you're a high C and whether or not this cast applies to you.
This is the final cast in this series because there are only 4 empty disk profiles. High D, high S, and high C always comes last. I'm sorry, high C, so you have to wait, but it's worth it. And every profile has strengths and weaknesses. There isn't a best profile for presenting, although high Is like to do it the most. That doesn't mean they're the best at it. And further, every profile has weaknesses when it comes to presenting, including you high Cs, I'm sorry. And any one of us can behave any way we like if we think about it first. So if we go into this with an analytical mind, thinking about the things that will resonate with the audience and the things that won't, and we change the things that won't, we can be more successful. And in this cast, that's what we're going to go through.
It should be pretty easy for the high Cs to go about this with an analytical mind.
It should,
right?
Exactly.
So,
and presentations come in a variety of types, so motivational, educational, briefings, instructive, problem solving, all sorts of things. So this is focused on a business presentation where you have to persuade a group to agree to your proposal. So that's kind of the meeting that we're in the mindset of when we're giving you this guidance.
Yeah. Our outline for this cast is consider your audience, bluff or executive summary, include the people factor, slide design, and rehearse.
And the first is consider your audience. And in every one of these, we've said consider your audience first because that's the most important thing. And everybody has to do that. You have to think about the people that are in the room with you, who you're trying to persuade. And your downfall in presentations is they're too long, they're too detailed, and they focus on the data, and there's not enough about people. And so what you want to do is construct your presentation so that you take account of the 3/4 of the people in the room who are not like you and who are looking for different things, including information about people. The assertive styles, the Ds and the Is, just want you to get to the point more quickly. They literally don't care about the data until they know what they're supposed to be doing with it. They don't build from the bottom up. They go from the top down and then they stop as soon as they're ready rather than going all the way down to the detail.
Yeah. Why am I here? What are we doing?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So for them, you want to include the bottom line up front or an executive summary, right? You want to make the point first, tell them what you're trying to persuade them to do or to think or to believe or to understand, and then give the explanation. And for the people-focused styles, the Is and the S's, they want to know who you talked to, what they said, what those people are feeling.
You just said feeling. Which for most high Cs, feelings have no place in a presentation or anything. And that's where we're trying to get you to understand that there are, roughly, depending on your organization and who you're presenting to, but roughly 50% of your audience potentially is people-focused. And so you got to understand that's what they're listening for. That's what they're focused on.
Yeah. And you probably think that feelings have nothing to do with decisions, but For other people, they do. They literally make decisions based on the people and ignore the data. And so if you want to be persuasive to those people, you have to include what they are looking for. And we're going to talk about that in detail, but we know you want to know the why as well as the what. So we're going to start with why we're doing it this way.
Absolutely. The key to success for really presenting anyone or anything, right? Anyone presenting anything at any time is you have to consider your audience. So that's why we talk about it first. And we've talked about it in each of these this series of casts. This is not just for high Cs. Everyone needs to do this. And so you've probably heard us say once or twice, if you've listened to Career Tools more than,
a week and
the last two, that communication is what the listener does. Sending the information in a manner which makes sense to the listener is how you make it easiest to understand for them. And that's what this whole series of casts is about, because presenting is just communicating. You're communicating to more than one person, which adds some nuance and complexity, but it's still communication. And that's why we're going over these things.
And as a high C, you like to have all of the information before you take action. You want to see the rationale, the explanation, all the details, so you can analyze for yourself if this is a good decision. My dad is a high C, and when he makes IKEA furniture, he takes the instruction book and he puts it on the table and he reads the instruction book at least twice before he even opens any of the pieces. And then he opens the pieces and he lays them down in letter order. And then he matches them with the instruction book. And then he moves all the packaging out of the way. And all of you high Cs are thinking, of course he does, because that's the right way to go about it. And I'm a high D, and I just open the box and start throwing things around. I make a mess and just keep going.
You probably have parts left over at the end.
Oh, for sure. And I put things together wrong, and then I have to take it apart again, and that piece is upside down, and I don't really care.
Yeah. I would say that's IKEA's fault, though, because some of these screws, they're like 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch. They're very, very close together.
They look the same. Exactly.
I mean, at least make them different colors.
Yes. If only. Literally, I will make my decision, like every other D and I, based on no data whatsoever. And when some data comes in that says I should change my mind, I will change my mind. And, my dad is infuriated by me because I start something and then I change my mind, or I find it doesn't work and then I do something else. And he's like, well, we already did this and now we're redoing it. If you'd thought about it first, we wouldn't be redoing the work. And that's how you feel at work when people like me just start something and then we go, oh, no, that's not going to work. We'll try something else.
Right.
But for me, there's an advantage in doing it my way, which is I get to get started faster, which in my mind means I'll finish sooner. It may not work out that way, but that's what the mentality I have going into it. So if somebody's trying to persuade me to something, then I just want to know, like, what do you want me to decide? And then I'll stop you when I've got enough information to make a decision. So some of your audience is like me and have that mentality. That's the way they're going into it. And it's not wrong. It's not good or bad. It's just different. And it works for me in some circumstances. And believe me, it doesn't in others. And vice versa.
Well, Wendy, I have a question for you because you're a high D. And this is, I don't mean to hijack our podcast to answer my own questions about high Ds because high Ds fascinate me. But some high Ds that I've talked to take that exact same approach. And the way I've heard them rationalize it is, even if we think through it a million times and all the different angles and all of that, we could run into things, or we will run into things, and we won't really understand the scope or complexity or what the issue is unless we're in it, unless we're actually doing it. Exactly. So in a vacuum on paper, that won't help us until we're actually down. So get on the road faster.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. I don't know what the problem is going to be until I start doing it, so I might as well start doing it and find that problem when I get there. Because I don't know I may not know what the solution is. So if you present the way you want to hear it, the way my dad would want to hear it, your Ds and Is are frustrated that you're taking so long. In the same way that in a presentation, when a D says, this is it, this is the decision, and doesn't present all their data, you're frustrated because you don't have all the information to know whether or not that decision is a good one or not. It's just two different angles from the same thing. So if you can imagine being frustrated by not having data, they're in the same place with too much data.
Yeah. And you'll lose them.
Yeah, exactly. They are less likely to agree with you than not more if they're frustrated. That's just human nature.
And even if you're saying to yourself, but it's logical, but this makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at the data and you walk through the steps, it makes sense. Yeah. And sometimes that doesn't matter, right? Sometimes once you lose them, they're gone and you can't get them back with any amount of logic or reasoning.
Yeah, hopefully we're explaining to you there is some rationale in the other style's brains. It's just not the same as yours.
Exactly. So from here, we're talking a lot about their empty disk profiles, but don't only consider their empty disk profile unless you have an audience that you know is entirely high Ds or is entirely high Cs. You have to be able to tailor your messaging to all of the profiles. Mm-hmm. You have to cover what we call, or what I tend to call in trainings, the hemispheres, mm-hmm. right? The assertive, the reserved, the task-focused, and the people-focused natures of each of the styles. So if you just cater to one profile, you're going to leave a lot of people wanting.
Even if you, as a high C, you convert everything to high D, you're still missing the I's, the S's, and the C's. So it's got to be for everybody.
Yeah. So just tailor your presentation accordingly, knowing that your audience is going to be comprised of assertive people, reserved people, task-focused people, and people-focused people.
So the first thing is a bluff or executive summary. And this is for the assertive types, the D's and I's.
Mm-hmm.
So state your purpose as the very first thing in your presentation. So in this case, we're discussing a proposal. So your purpose might sound like this. Our purpose is to decide whether we should hire 3 additional translators this year. Or, my purpose is to brief you on the proposal to move operations to China and obtain your blessing on my plan to do so. Or, our purpose is to decide on the team for the next phase of Project Phoenix. Now, for the people-focused people, that one sentence is not going to bother them. I guess it's not like you're alienating the other styles in giving the assertive ones something. The high S is quite happy to sit through your explanation, and a high C is thinking, good, I know what we're trying to do now. So you're not alienating anybody, but you're improving the reception you get from the assertive styles.
And I think the high Cs, hopefully they'll pick up on this, but they may not pick up on this. They're pretty detail oriented. But even word choice is really important here because as Wendy mentioned, you're not going to lose the people-focused people just because you're being very clear about your purpose. But that second example you gave, Wendy, and obtain your blessing on my plan to do so, blessing is a more people-focused term, right? You could have said, and obtain your approval, which would be more task-focused, I would argue,
exactly.
Right? So you can be very deliberate with word choice, especially on something as important as your initial purpose or statement, to consider, again, all of the different profiles.
You know, folks, people ask me all the time about presenting. And I tell them, if you want to be better as a presenter, become a manager because you're going to start presenting. Because the adult learning model teaches us, this is true everywhere, that if you want to get better at something, just do it a lot. Doesn't work for kids always, but it works for adults really, really well. If you want to present more and it makes a difference, then you need to become a manager. And then you'll really want to learn how to present well. And if you want to learn how to become a manager, come to our Effective Manager Conference. We have all of 2023 already up on our website. Here it is. We're recording this in July of 2022. So we've probably got 100 different conferences for you to pick from all over the US and overseas as well. Should be easy pickings for y'all. So come to the website, sign up.
Okay, so the next thing is what you want your audience to do. So in some examples of this will be a preview of the conclusion. In others, it will be a preview of the data that they're about to see and hear. It's a sort of primer for you to get them in the right frame of mind for what you want them to do. So
right, exactly.
Here's some examples.
So some examples of that would be, I believe that we need to hire at least 2 translators in Q2 and 1 in Q3 in order to fulfill the demand predicted by our sales teams.
So that's my conclusion, and I want you to decide. I've already told them in the our purpose is to decide. So then I'm telling you, this is what my proposal is, and you're deciding yes or no to this.
Right, exactly. Another example would be the plan has implications for sales, operations, and customer fulfillment, and I'd like you to understand those in order to make an informed decision to support the proposal. Right? We've got a proposal, very simple, what we're going to walk them through. Another example would be, I have a draft team plan, and I'd like your input on both the individuals selected and the roles I've given them. By the end of the meeting, I would like to have an agreed upon team to take to the program manager.
So now we know what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So now the assertive styles know that, why they're there and what they're supposed to do while they're there and what to expect. Now they can settle down and listen, because otherwise, if you start with the data, they're not listening to the data. They're waiting to find out that information. So if you put it up front, you actually get more attention from them.
Yeah, they're saying to themselves from the very beginning, as soon as you open your mouth, what am I listening for? What am I trying to glean from whatever this is, right?
And in the same way that you sometimes find it hard to listen to a presentation when you don't have the detail first, they find it hard to listen when they don't know the what and why first. And so starting with that bottom line really means that you keep them with you.
Right, exactly. They don't want to hear all the data that you gathered and analyzed before you decided upon your recommendation. They want to know what you're recommending right up front. And this can benefit you, I think, partly because if you have good relationships in this room or in this audience, some of them you've already got a ton of credibility. Mm-hmm. And so just by giving them what you are recommending, you're giving them the opportunity to listen for support, right? Mm-hmm. Listen to back up. They're already on your side and they just want to have ammunition in case someone asks or someone else is a detractor that they can say, oh, but I mean, really, when you think of this, right? I mean, and so there's a lot of benefits that you won't even necessarily know along the way.
Right. And if a D&I trusts you, they might not even want to hear the rest of the presentation.
Totally.
You know, if you do have that great relationship, I could go to Andrew and say, I think you should take the 6:40 flight out of LA. It's the best one. Now, if I've booked travel for Andrew for months and I've always chosen the same flights as he does, then he trusts me. He doesn't need to know what all of the other flights are or all of the other costs or what other options there are. He'll just say, yep, fine. Now, that's a small example, but it grows. You know, the bigger the proposal, probably the more data you're going to have to provide, but it may not be as much as you think that someone else, it probably isn't as much as you think they need. And that is a sign of their trust in you, that you've done the analysis and you've done it right.
Right, exactly. And conversely, I mean, if you don't have a good relationship, or maybe they don't trust you, or you don't have that level of competence or confidence, you know, or they don't have that level of confidence in you, then by giving them that information up front, you're kind of heading some of that off, mm-hmm. right? You're getting them to at least set some of that aside or get over that mm-hmm. in the beginning so that they can listen with as much of an open mind as they're going to have. Does that make sense, Wendy?
Yeah, absolutely. So now we did that first opening for our D's and I's, the assertive style. So the next one, you're a task-focused style. So the other part that you're going to miss out is the people focus. You have to include people focus because the I's and the S's want to hear it. So you're going to talk about who you spoke to with their names, what they said, and what they felt. And half your audiences, like literally the I's and the S's, are basing their decisions not on the numbers, not on the science, not on the logic, but on the effects on the people involved. If you have a perfect proposal, but it'll cause somebody some stress, it's possible that the high S won't approve it, even if it makes logical sense.
Yeah. Some examples of what this people focus communication could sound like is like this. Having spoken with Brian, the sales manager, and Erica, the translation services manager, I discovered that Erica is very concerned about her team's ability to deliver on the pipeline that Brian is predicting. This graph shows, right? And then you kind of go into that, but you start with the people focus, right? That you talk to Brian, you talk to Erica, right? Erica has concerns, right? Those are people-focused terms and phrasing. Another example would be the plan impacts the operations teams managed by Joe, Elaine, and Ben. I've gone over the plan with all three ahead of this meeting, and they have confidence that they'll be able to deliver on it without impacting their team members.
So you're not only telling the people-focused people, I've gone and talked to these people, and I have already allayed their concerns, and therefore you don't need to have any concerns in this area.
Exactly. And lastly, another example would be, I have reviewed all my draft staffing with the relevant people's functional managers. On this chart, you can see each of the team marked in red, amber, and green. This corresponds with the functional manager's assessment of the role that I've assigned compared with the person's stated desirable career path in our system. As you can see, 80% of the team are green.
Yeah, it's probably amazing to you that someone would consider staffing a team not based on a hard assessment of their skills, but on what people want to be doing. But half of your audience, that's how they would staff a team, based on what people want to be doing. And so you have to be able to tell them, I've considered that too, and this is how it comes out.
Right. Well, and I think some of the high Cs that are listening to this, that may have really resonated with them, because what you've done in that example, Wendy, is taken a very people-focused behavior, right? Choosing people, putting people in roles that's based on what their career desire, career interests are, but quantifying it, right?
Yes.
Making it quantifiable, which was just, appeals to high Cs because of their data focus. Yeah.
And Ds, because Ds don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ds would probably go, yeah, I don't care whether they want to do it or not. Like, moving on. They probably just ignore that slide entirely.
Right.
Are they going to get it done? Good.
Yeah. They do like the one data point, though, 80%.
Exactly. Right? 80%. Good. I'm good. So once you've finished your presentation, or you think you've finished it, go through it again with an eye to the people focus. Think about, have I included those people actions? Have I thought about this from the lens of someone who's concerned about people? And it's likely that you haven't, because that's not your strength, in which case now you have a chance to amend your presentation.
Right, exactly. So the next thing we want to talk about is the content, okay? Don't include all of your proof in the presentation. We know you have the data. We know you have enough data to make the argument crystal clear. You don't need to include everything in the presentation. After 2 or 3 such slides, the Ds and Is have tuned out. They've moved on, either in their head or on their phone or something, right? They're beyond it. You don't need to provide every single element that proves your point. You don't need to consider every angle. What you do need to consider is what is going to be the most persuasive, because that's what we're talking about, that type of presentation here. That's the stuff you leave in, okay? The stuff that's most persuasive.
And similarly, we don't want you to include all the detail on a slide in your deck, because it nearly always makes the slide unreadable and not persuasive. Like, you are the people that are most likely to include a table straight from Excel, or even a linked table, so it's up to date, on a slide. But don't do this. It's way too much data. Apart from the technical, it breaks and then you're looking embarrassed. They're usually too small to read, or there's too much data to take in order to draw any conclusions. And so it just loses people. Instead, you want to roll that data up so you've got, 2 or 3 numbers that show this is why my decision is X, Y, and Z, or this is why I think this is what we should do. And you aren't helping yourself if they can't read or can't analyze those numbers in the 3 seconds that the slide is up there.
No, you're certainly not helping, and I would say in a lot of cases you're hurting yourself. Instead, what you should provide is, on any single slide, there should be the numbers and data that are the most persuasive to the objective of that slide, right? We've got to be selective here. So, for example, if your presentation is to show that you need additional staff on your technical team, and one slide shows the hours the current team worked over the last 52 weeks, instead of showing the table with a column for each week and the rows showing each of the team, show a high-level graph or rolled up numbers over the 52 weeks. The intention is that anyone who looks at the slide can immediately draw the conclusion that you want them to have. You can include the detail in another document that's sent to the participants afterwards, or you can have, that data available to show if they ask, but that shouldn't be part of the framework of your presentation.
And this is often why your presentations go long. It's because you include all of that data, and then you have to explain all the data, and that takes time, and people start to ask questions. If you just give them the high level, it goes faster and you don't have as many questions. I think it's a benefit.
Yeah.
The last one of these is rehearse. And we recommend you rehearse your presentation. Any presentation, rehearse it. Rehearsing allows you to hone your message and therefore be quicker for the impatient high Ds. And it means that you say the right words, even if you're nervous. The number of times I've tried to present and I haven't rehearsed enough and I've said something and then somebody asked me a question and I was like, no, that's not what I meant, because I said the wrong word. And it also allows you to focus on the people in the room, not the words you're saying. So you can look at people, and when they're starting to look confused, you've probably gone too deep.
Yeah. And I will say, to maybe come to the defense of some high Cs, high Cs are preparers. They prepare, right? What we're trying to say to you high Cs in this cast is spend the time that you would normally spend refining the table, refining the data, figuring out how to make the active link work in the PowerPoint. Take all that out and spend that time actually saying the words out loud.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
And practice the behaviors that make your presentation more personable. So smile. Like, if you don't remind yourself, you will forget to smile. If you're doing a Zoom presentation, make a sticky note, put it on the top of your Zoom monitor that says smile.
Make it a task.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Use bigger gestures. You tend to make small gestures, and that means that they can't be seen if people are a little bit away from you or if you're on Zoom. So you want to use bigger gestures, use people's names. If somebody asks you a question, say, thank you, Andrew, or, oh, great question, Bob, whatever. Ask questions. If somebody says something about some data that you have, you put up some data and somebody says, I don't know, are you sure that's right? Ask them a question. Say, I'm pretty sure it is, but what are you seeing that's off? Can you explain it to me? Involve them in a conversation rather than starting a confrontation about accuracy.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And speak a little louder and a little faster than you would do normally. High Cs speak more slowly and more quietly. And that makes Ds and Is think they have no energy. And if you have no energy, you have no passion. And if you have no passion, why should I be persuaded? If you don't believe in whatever it is you're persuading me for, then I shouldn't be persuaded. So speaking a little faster and a little louder helps you with the energy and the passion, and therefore makes the other styles believe that you believe in your solution.
Absolutely. And I would just add, just to punctuate this a little bit, speaking louder and faster for high Cs is so crucial, because some people, I've heard it said about giving presentations or presenting that you should vary your tone, right? You don't want your tone, your inflection and speed and volume to all be the same. And this is really important, because if you focus on speaking louder and faster, you will do that naturally. You will have, because you will slip into your natural tone, either when you're when you're answering a question or when you're asking a probing question. In some of those interpersonal moments in the presentation, you'll slip back into your natural tone or volume, and that will give you the variability for sure.
Yeah, I've never thought of that, but it's really true.
Yeah. So the bottom line about rehearsing is rehearsing hurts. It hurts everyone, though. It's not just high Cs. High Ds think rehearsing is unnecessary. High Is think it's boring. high S's are uncomfortable standing up in front of a room as if they know everything, or, why should people take my word on this, or why am I, persuading someone? No one likes to rehearse. And everyone, regardless of if they're the mailroom clerk or they're the CEO, is better for rehearsing. So rehearse.
If there's a silver bullet to good presentations, rehearsing is it. And, it's the one thing that nobody wants to do. But yeah, high Cs are not natural presenters because your reserved nature leads to a quiet voice and small gestures, and that's not engaging for the audience. And if you combine that with the missing half of the puzzle, the people piece, and diving too far into the weeds, a presentation from a high C can be a disaster. Now, that's not to say a presentation from a DIS can't be a disaster too. They can, in different ways. And that said, we can behave any way we want when we think about it first. We can certainly make changes to slides to make them easier to read. I mean, that takes brain power, and you've got plenty of that. And if the slides are easy to read, and there's not too many of them, and they follow the narrative, they give a narrative, they help support your points, it takes the burden off your verbal or presentation fluency. So actually you can be a worse presenter if the slides are better because they're helping you. And if that is the case, you're much more likely to be successful.
Absolutely. Which is what we want for you.
Absolutely we do. Yes, for sure. That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with a new topic. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Wendy. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.